whether we go to work physically, whether we work from home, whether we are working remotely and connecting like this online, on video conferences, on phone calls, on emails, on WhatsApp, or we go to off-sites, we go for trainings outside, all of these are considered to be workplaces. I want to talk about the law. This law came into being in 2013. And yes, as you can see on the screen, this law is specifically for women. So we talk about sexual harassment of women at workplace. And I think all of us over here can understand why the nation felt that there is a need to come up with a special law for women. Because yes, statistically, they are a minority and they do experience it a lot more. That being said, I also agree that it should be sexual harassment at workplace and it should cover everyone regardless of their gender. And that is exactly what we try to do when we talk about implementation of the law. We make sure that there are gender inclusive policies and that it's not just for women. Okay. So let's look at this. Now, compliance-wise, this law is applicable to all organizations. This also includes educational institutions, schools, NGOs, any type of organization, any type of workplace, which has more than 10 employees. And even if these 10 employees are all males, that also the compliance requirement would still be applicable to you. It doesn't say that the employees need to have women at workplace. Okay. Now, let's look at what these compliance requirements look like. So the law says that there should be a policy which is specifically targeting sexual harassment, that the policy should be circulated amongst everyone, that the organization should also constitute an internal committee. Now, internal committee is a special trained committee that inquires into complaints of sexual harassment. Okay, so they are sort of the gatekeepers of the law at the organization. The IC, the internal committee, also has to be registered with all district bodies. In fact, just right now on 13th May this year, the Supreme Court has told all the jurisdictions, all the state and union territories to start implementing this law quite strictly. Right? So we see that since 2013 to 2023, actually way less than 50% of the workplaces in India are actually complying with the law. Some of the other compliance requirements include, there's some documentation involved, so which means submission of annual report or providing details in the organization's report. The law also talks about creating awareness through having notices or posters, whether it's in your in-person physical office space or whether you share it via email if you're working remotely or from home. It also includes regular trainings and awareness programs for employees and training of IC members. Now let's quickly go through who can file a complaint under this. So since there is a law and the law talks about prevention, prohibition and redressal, so we know that the prevention and prohibition is happening through policies, through trainings, through awareness. I want to briefly tell you all about what the redressal looks like. So when I say redressal, we are talking about what happens when there's a complaint of sexual harassment. Now, as you can see, as per the law is very specific to women. So they say that any women, whether employed or not, can file a complaint of sexual harassment. So even if there's a woman who, say for instance, has come to your workplace and they are not working over there. Let's say some person has come to deliver some post and she's a woman and she doesn't work at your organization. And say she experiences sexual harassment by one of the employees. She can still file a complaint. This law also covers the unorganized sector, which means the domestic help that we have in our house. All of us, many of us have people who come to our house and help us out with either cooking, cleaning, gardening, any of these. Now, these are not so-called official labor. We don't have any contracts with them, but they are also protected under the law. And if they want to file and because then we become the employer, if they want to file a complaint against us, they can do so with there's also a local district committee. There's a local committee in every city that we live in. Now, as I mentioned, I know that the law is only for women, but we usually try and ensure that whenever organizations are implementing these compliances, we create a gender inclusive policy. This means that we want to make sure that all employees, regardless of their gender, so we don't even say just man and women, we include everyone, right? People who don't identify as a woman or a man as well. And so in this way, we can ensure that everyone who's working in the organization has a way to raise an issue if they ever experience such inappropriate behaviors. Now we know who can file a complaint. Let's see against whom can we file a complaint. So as per the law, the complaint can be filed against any employee, right? Over here, the law has not mentioned any specific gender. So we can file a complaint against anyone, whether they're a man or a woman or any other gender. Okay. Now, for your organization to look into the complaint of sexual harassment, it has to be an employee of your organization. If it is some other employee, then the complaint will be forwarded to that organization, right? Because your organization can only take action on your employees. They can't take any action on other employees. They have no legal jurisdiction. So in that way, depending on where the person is working, that's the organization where you have to file a complaint. Now, I understand that street sexual harassment or sexual harassment happening in public spaces is also a very, very common occurrence. To address that, the Indian Penal Code also acknowledges and recognizes sexual harassment as an offense, and you can also file an FIR if you experience it in public places and not at workplace. All right. So it is also something that is punishable under the law, and there is a sentence of 3 to 5 years of imprisonment and even fine under the IPC. Now, since we are talking about sexual harassment at workplace, it becomes very, very important to understand what is workplace, right? So the law is very vague on this. It says that any place visited by the employee arising out of or during the course of employment, which means that whether we go to work physically, whether we work from home, whether we are working remotely and connecting like this online, on video conferences, on phone calls, on emails, on WhatsApp, or we go to offsites, we go for trainings outside, all of these are considered to be workplaces. Even when you go outside and let's say that your organization, your company has arranged for a travel for you, whether it's a cab, if something happens over there, it's still workplace. If you are staying in a hotel because of work reasons, because you're traveling for work, the hotel will also become workplace. So it basically means that anywhere that you go for your work, or even sometimes, we are maybe working from outside, from cafes, and we meet some of our colleagues over there and we are working over there, that will also count as workplace, right? And we like to believe that because the interpretation of the definition of workplace is so vast, we use this one very simple funda to help us identify what is workplace for us. Okay, so 2 conditions: whether when it's happening between people who are working together, all right, regardless of where it happens, and if there is a chance that it's going to impact the workplace environment. So even if you're meeting informally outside, going out for informal parties, lunches, dinners, whatever, if something happens over there, and if you think that it is going to have a direct impact at workplace, it's going to create a very uncomfortable, unfavorable working environment, then we would consider it to be workplace. Because we do believe that the whole aim of having this law is to make the workplace a little bit safer. a little bit psychologically safer, so that people feel comfortable where they spend most of their time, so that they feel like, okay, they can speak up, they can grow, develop professionally as well. Now, as I mentioned, the internal committee is a body that is, as per the law, trained to look into complaints of sexual harassment. So as you see on the screen, the committee has to have a minimum of 4 members. Maximum, there's no limit. The committee has to be headed by a woman employee at a senior level. The committee also has to have 2 other members who are employees. And there also has to be an external member from another organization. This is to make sure that there is a third perspective and there is no bias happening, right? Now, at least 50% of the members have to be women as per the law. And this committee is for a time period of 3 years, after which it is reconstituted. I want to also briefly talk to you about how whenever there's a complaint that comes up, how does a committee look into it, right? So the law is very, very fair and transparent on this. The committee, whenever there's a complaint, will invite both the parties, the complainant, person who has filed a complaint, and respondent, somebody against whom complaint was filed. We don't call this person accused because we don't know if they've actually done something like this. So we give both of them a fair and equal chance to make their case. And if somebody is found guilty of sexual harassment, the type of consequences that the committee recommends includes apology letter, warning, counseling sessions, stopping their promotion or stopping their increment. And the worst of all is you may get terminated from your job. So depending on the severity of sexual harassment, these kind of actions can be recommended. Now, I also want to say that if the complaint is found to be false or malicious, if there is proof that the complaint is false or malicious, the same consequences are applicable to the complainant also. All right, so it is a very fair, transparent process where not the process, but also the consequences are applicable to both depending on what the outcome is. Now, when we talk about compliance, there also is penalties when there's non-compliance. So failure to constitute an IC at an organization or breach of any provision. So whether if you don't have a policy, if there are no posters, if the annual report doesn't get submitted and on time, it can be amounted to 50,000 rupees. Or subsequent, if the penalty is applicable more than once, it can also lead to cancellation or withdrawal of your organization's license or of the registration. In one of the cases that we saw in 2014, there was a company in Chennai where a woman had filed a complaint. Yes, there were a lot of factors involved, but because of its failure to comply with the law, they ended up paying 1.68 crores to the law and the woman who had filed the complaint of sexual harassment. So apart from, not to say that we should comply with the law only for creating safe workplaces, but the law has also ensured that if this doesn't happen, there are severe penalties applicable as well. We have spoken about what microaggressions look like, what inappropriate behaviors like sexual harassment, discrimination at workplace looks like. Let's talk about now, how do we create a culture of safety, mutual respect, and inclusion? Now, before we do that, before I directly talk about how we can create this, I want to know, what does it even look like? What does feeling safe, feeling respected, or feeling included at work even look like? What do you think this feeling of being safe at work looks like? What does it make possible when you feel respected at work, when you feel included at work? Because I believe that once we know what it looks like, we know what to do about it. So let's look at this. When we feel safe and respected and included, we feel like, okay, we have a sense of control over ourselves and over the environment. We don't feel lost. We don't feel directionless, right? We feel like we belong, right? Like we feel like, okay, I'm going to wake up. Today is Monday. We had a great weekend. Oof, I'm really, really tired. It's Monday. But no, I really like going to my place of work. So I'm going to be a little bit happy about it. we are at peace, right? We feel supported by our peers. We are able to speak up for ourselves. What is extremely important is that we feel confident to disagree. We feel comfortable knowing that we can share our opinion even if it is different from others. That we are not going to be humiliated or ridiculed or made fun of if we speak up. And we feel confident to handle stressful situations. Right? So now that we know what it looks like to feel safe and respected and included at work, let's look at what are some of the things, what are some practices that we can implement to make sure that this happens. Okay. Now, the list on the left-hand side is specifically for things that organizations can do at a macro level. So one is they can comply with the specific laws. They can create inclusive policies and practices. This includes having inclusive policies right from recruiting new employees up until the employee life cycle ends and they are leaving the organization. Right? So ensuring that you are focusing on individuals, the talent they bring, their expertise, and not on their gender, not on their race, not on their appearance, not on their color. Right? Creating awareness sessions, whether the sessions include talking about unconscious biases, talking about stereotypes, prejudices, talking about inappropriate behaviors, right? Having gender sensitization sessions so that both male and women, men and women feel comfortable working with each other. Sometimes I've noticed that specifically male managers struggle to work with their subordinate female managers, right? So these kind of trainings can really help provide them with tools to know how to work together, to make sure that there are robust grievance redressal mechanisms. So not just for addressing sexual harassment, but also for addressing other types of grievances. Having an open door policy or a 360-degree feedback, where we make sure that we hear from everybody around us, not just from those who are above us or below us. We make sure that if ever you are feeling uncomfortable, you are feeling safe and comfortable to go and speak up with your supervisor. Right? And some of the things that we as employees can also do on a personal level with our teams, etc., is just being mindful of our own unconscious biases. I'm sure that many of us have been the ones to make these comments that we saw in the beginning about microaggressions. In fact, I have found myself doing that at times. And it is really important that once we are able to just become more conscious of it, we'll catch ourselves doing it. And it will decrease automatically, right? Knowing what other people's boundaries are, what their boundaries are in terms of physical boundaries, whether it's okay to put our hands on their shoulders or hug them without asking. So really knowing what other people's boundaries are, not just physical boundaries, but also mental, emotional boundaries. Like not asking somebody personal questions like, oh, when are you planning to get married? Or where are you going on a honeymoon? Or when are you planning to have babies? Or do you have a boyfriend or girlfriend or not? Right? Just knowing where we are and whether the person will be okay if we have these kind of conversations with them. Saying and accepting a no. Right? Feeling comfortable to say no if you don't want to commit to something, do something at work, and the other person accepting that no. Now, this doesn't mean that if you are given work and you don't want to do the work, you say no. Right? I'm not talking about just work over here. I'm talking about interactions where people are expecting you to do something which is a little bit beyond work. Right? Avoid the bystander effect. If you are noticing somebody else get uncomfortable or you're noticing somebody else behaving inappropriately, speak up, intervene. You can go and report it, or you can intervene directly over there as well. Right? Discouraging others, acknowledging our own mistakes, taking accountability when we have messed up, when we have made an error, acknowledging it, taking accountability of it, making repair, apologizing. Right? Or when we find ourselves in situations where we may not understand how we were at fault, or we may not understand how somebody felt uncomfortable by something that we did. Let's be curious. Let's ask, okay, what is it that I did? How did it affect you? Right? Let's try to have an open, curious mind to understand how we can be the best versions of ourselves.